You don't like my gavel? Jeez. She pointed at me. I don't know what that means.
I'm in sync.
Oh, God, I got this stupid thing. What is that?
That's the PC, right? Oh, no, that's the presentation.
1,082 pages.
Yeah.
Good thing I took Evelyn with.
The special meeting of the Lomita Planning Commission to order on Monday, September 23rd. It is 6:05. And if, Mike, would you like to lead us in the flag salute?
Everybody please stand. Put your hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, can you take the roll, please?
Thank you. Commissioner Camerata?
Here.
Commissioner Graff?
Here.
I don't see Commissioner Santos, so he is absent at this point. Commissioner Steinbach? Here. Vice Chair Mattingly? Here. And Chair Stevens.
Here.
Thank you.
Wait.
Oh, we forgot
Wait.
somebody.
I didn't hear my name called. I can leave.
Terrible. Commissioner Dever. I jumped. Wow.
That's okay.
Way to feel welcome, huh?
Gosh.
Okay.
I can't blame you for anything, no.
Now that that's taken care of, I would like to go directly into the public hearing. First, I want to acknowledge a letter that was emailed from Sherry Stelly, and acknowledge that that was received and read by us. Now,
And sorry, and if I may, Chair Stevens, we did also receive an email today from the same party regarding the same item, the same.
oh, so we received it twice?
Yes, well, no, this is a sort of a follow-up to the initial one. The initial one came this afternoon.
Oh, okay. We'll note that. So now on to a discussion and consideration of the general plan amendment number 2024-02, zoning text amendment number 2024-05, zoning amendment 24-02, and environmental impact report number 2024-01, general plan update and related environmental impact report and zoning map, and text amendments to various sections of the Lomita Municipal Code Title 11, amendments to Planning and Zoning, Chapter 1 Zoning to implement policies and programs of the certification of Lomita 2021 through 2029 housing element. Applicant is City of Lomita, And I believe Adrian is going to make a presentation.
Actually, Perry will be giving the presentation today. Perry works for De Novo, who is our consulting firm helping us with all the documents related to the general plan and EIR.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission. It's good to see you. I know that I saw, I think, a few faces at the open house about a month ago regarding the same topic, so it's a pleasure to be back. I know it's been a minute since we've presented to the Planning Commission, but we're at a point right now where we're getting close to getting this one across the finish line, so I'm happy to be here to present the item tonight. Next slide, please. There's a fair bit to discover or to present, and I'll try to keep the presentation as concise as possible, but just to give you a little overview of what we'll be talking about tonight, I'm going to start with some project background, talk about the timeline a little bit. We'll get into the approach that we took in the development of the general plan, talk about the draft general plan itself, the policy document that is. Next, we'll talk about the environmental impact report that analyzed the environmental impacts of the project, get into the zoning code update, and then finally leave you with the staff recommendation. Next slide, please. So to give you that background again and probably stir up some memories, what really kind of precipitated this project was the adoption and certification of the city's housing element back in 2022. Following that, the city then launched the comprehensive general plan update. De Novo was brought on board in May of 2023, and we very actively got things underway with some workshops in June and July. Part of this project as well is the corresponding zoning code update. There's two phases to this component, actually. We're going to deal with the rezoning component tonight. What'll follow within the next few months are objective design standards, and kind of a basket of other prioritized amendments that the city would like to see done to the zoning code. The environmental impact report is a big part of this project. Whenever you do a general plan update, a project of this scale, typically it'll trigger an environmental impact report. So we'll talk about that document in a little bit. And of course, the project, and again, I'm going to get into the timing in a minute, but the project is going to implement specifically 3 programs in the housing elements: Program 11, Objective Design Standards; Program 12, Lot Consolidation; and Program 14, most importantly, the Rezone Program. Next slide, please. So again, your 21 through 2029 housing element, which I would imagine that this Planning Commission considered and approved, identified a shortfall of sites or capacity in the city for the city to fully meet its lower income regional housing needs allocation. So what Program 14 in the housing element does is it requires the city to do 3 things. It requires the city to rezone to accommodate the shortfall for lower income RHNA, to rezone to accommodate the remaining moderate and above moderate income RHNA, and to rezone to create a buffer of capacity for lower and moderate income RHNA. And the city is to do all of this by October 15th, 2024, which is just around the corner, of course. So I want to highlight 2 things. There's the driving factors for this project were one, that the city is required to do this rezoning, went the extra effort to do the comprehensive general plan update as well. So that's the driving factor to get this done to meet the requirements of HCD. The other thing is the October 15th, 2024 deadline, which is a hard deadline. And I bring this up because a typical general plan update will last 20 to 24 months. That's even for a city the size of Lomita. This project here, because of that deadline, we had to have it done in 17 months. So I'm sure that it felt rushed at some times. And you may recall that back at the beginning of the process, because of the lead time that's required for the environmental impact report, we had to arrive at a land use plan, a preferred land use plan, by November of last year so that we could kick the environmental impact report off. So that's why it may have felt like it came early and it came fast to the Planning Commission and the City Council, but there was reasoning behind that. Next slide, please. Just to talk about the timeline again, we're in the highlighted box at the public hearing adoption phase of the project. You're considering the general plan update, phase 1 of the zoning code update, and in the EIR. Along the way, as I mentioned, back in June and July of last year, we had a series of 3 workshops. They were very well attended. Another online survey that I think we got something in the neighborhood of 162 or 163 responses. So we got good public input at the front end of the project as far as the direction that this update should take. The GPAC was formed and started to meet. They met. They had 8 meetings over the course of about 10 months, and we looked at the existing conditions in the city as well, just to identify what was currently on the ground and where we needed to go to achieve what we wanted to achieve with the general plan. We did the analysis and we produced, and I'll speak about this in a minute, but we produced 4 land use alternatives that the Planning Commission and the City Council considered. Ultimately, there was a preferred land use plan that was chosen, and that again happened in November, and almost immediately we kicked off the EIR. We needed to have a project description to get the EIR going. Took care of that in December, and we're able to then really get into the development of the general plan, the crafting of the phase 1 of the zoning code, and the preparation of the EIR really throughout this year, January through September, which brings us to this point. The last part of this project, as I mentioned, will be phase 2 of the zoning code update, where we'll come back to the Planning Commission, probably have study session of some sort with the Planning Commission, just to understand what your priorities are as far as the zoning code update is concerned in phase 2. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the approach to the general plan then. Next slide, please. So just, I know that you deal with this regularly, but just as a reminder, the general plan is that the city's strategic blueprint for what is going to occur over the next 20 to 25 years. So it articulates the community's vision, its strategy for future development and growth. Establishes all those long-term goals with regard to land use, transportation, et cetera. And it provides you guys, the decision makers and the City Council, with a basis for understanding whether a project meets is aligned with the city's interests and the direction that the city wants to go in. And it informs the city, citizens, developers, neighboring jurisdictions, just where exactly Lomita wants to go with its development and resource conservation matters. Next slide, please. So when we put together this general plan, I talked a little bit about public input already, but we take all these things into consideration, that public input, any new state requirements that are coming through Assembly bills and Senate bills, and then we look at the existing conditions to see what's currently on the ground. Next slide. So we had a pretty robust public input process. What we like to do with our workshops, we know that there's momentum that happens with these workshops, so kind of had those over a 6-week period. We had the 3 workshops. On the heels of that, we had the online survey. It was well attended. But we also did some pop-up events. We were at Founders Day, National Night Out, built a project website, used social media to advertise when documents would be available or if the survey was available. And as I said, we formed the GPAC. That was a 12-member GPAC. George was a member of the GPAC. They gave great direction on where we would go with the general plan. And most recently, about a month ago, we had the open house to present a draft version of the document. Next slide. As far as state requirements are concerned, a number of new laws, Senate bills and Assembly bills that have been passed over the past few years, and California Government Code often dictates the topics that need to be included in your general plan, but there's been bills that have addressed housing, transportation, climate change, and environmental justice recently, so we've had to consider all of those. And just as a note, when a city fails to address some of these new state laws, then they risk not having state or federal or grant funding available to them and potentially putting the city in some kind of legal jeopardy for not adopting state law. Next slide, please. With regard to the existing conditions, the existing conditions cover all those topics that are in the general plan update, including land use, transportation. We looked at the community facilities, looked at matters of environmental justice. What was your park situation like? There was also the traffic impact analysis that became part of the existing conditions report. This is the document. When we build our general plans, it sort of works like this. We start with an existing conditions report. That's the first layer. Then we do our environmental impact report. That's the next layer. And then finally, we have the general plan policy document, which is the document that shows your goals, policies, and action items. But they're all built off of one another. And kind of as you can figure, the existing conditions report is like a companion document to the general plan policy document. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to remind the Planning Commission, how we arrived at the land use designations in the preferred land use plan. So back in almost a year ago, in October of 2023, we introduced the Planning Commission and the City Council to 4 land use alternatives. And actually, it started off with 8 in the GPAC. We narrowed it down to 4, presented those to the Planning Commission, City Council. Those 4 alternatives, they ranged in terms of densities and intensities. There was a baseline approach, which was essentially no change, status quo. Business as usual was no change, status quo. Baseline was just simply adopting what the housing element was asking for. Then there was another variation called core and perimeter, which I'll touch on in a minute. And then finally, there was kind of a maximalist approach, kind of higher densities, more development in the residential neighborhoods. It was easy for Planning Commission and City Council to strike 1 and 4. And I know that the Planning Commission leaned in favor of alternative 2. At the end of the day, the City Council elected to go with a variation of alternative 3. But just in general, all of these alternatives really, they focused development along the city's main corridors and at key nodes in the city. Next slide. So when we arrived at the preferred land use plan, the idea behind this preferred land use plan is that it was going to be a catalyst for growth along your major corridors. It would allow for medium and higher density mixed use development along the corridors. You can see that density gradually increases towards key nodes, and those key nodes were the east and west ends of Lomita Boulevard, the intersection at Narbonne and PCH, and then City Council wanted to activate the southern portion of the city along Palos Verdes Drive and that commercial area as well. So higher densities for residential would be allowed at those areas. The idea here too was that by bringing activity into these areas, that you would encourage a more walkable environment and that there would be people there to support the commercial growth of those areas. Next slide, please. So let's talk now about how we started to then craft out the general plan. Along the way, when we were having these public workshops and speaking to the GPAC and Planning Commission and City Council, there were couple of overarching objectives. We heard that we absolutely need to preserve, protect, and enhance the city's existing residential neighborhoods. So that's why there's very little got touched in the existing low-density residential neighborhoods. Most of the focus on the new land use designations is just along the corridors. Celebrate and enhance downtown Lomita, and I think that's kind of a common theme amongst a lot of your documents. Really want to sort of energize downtown Lomita. Expand the range of housing opportunities or housing choices for people, encourage new uses in Lomita, promote walkability, create pedestrian scale environments, target housing growth to support commercial activity, and reinforce those commercial corridors with memorable places. And kind of underlying all this, make sure that whatever you're proposing, that the city is going to maintain strong fiscal sustainability. Next slide, please. So in the general plan policy document itself, in the introduction section, there's 2 things. There's community vision, and there's some guiding principles. I won't read this in its entirety, but I think you generally get the idea, and there's actually 2 other paragraphs that go with this. But when we create a community vision, this is sort of what the community sort of aspires to be by 2045. And like I say, that's in that document, so I won't read it verbatim. Next slide, please. Just to give you an idea of the general plan structure, nothing out of the ordinary here. I'm just on this matrix, I'm just showing what's required by the state, what Lomita's general plan is going to entail. You'll notice too that of course the housing element and the safety element both prepared ahead of this comprehensive general plan update, so they're under separate cover. And the other element that this city has that isn't a required or state mandated element, but the economic development element, became very clear in this process that that was an important component of your general plan. So we prepared that as well. Next slide. In the general plan policy document, you'll notice, of course, that there's goals, policies, and actions. Goals, of course, are these kind of broad affirmative statements sort of where the city wants to be in 20 years. The policies get a little bit more nuanced. They're the kind of the action items that really guide decision makers in a specific direction. And finally, the action, here's where you could start to measure the success or the implementation of your general plan. The actions are actually the measures that carry out activities to make sure that the goals and policies are implemented. Next slide, please. With regard to land use and the land use element for that matter, there are a few new land use designations that were created in this process. So we have mixed use 30, mixed use 40, and mixed use 70. So they incrementally allow greater density in those areas. Again, the nodes are at the Narbonne and PCH and at the corners of Lomita Boulevard. Go ahead, next slide. So touching on the environmental impact report a little bit, next slide. I know you probably have an idea already as to what one is, but again, it's that document that goes and analyzes the environmental impacts of a project like a general plan update or a development project. But in this process, because it's such it's a document that requires a public review, so it creates a little bit of a forum for people to interact and to speak about the project itself. The EIR is really meant to be an objective document, so it's not advocating for the project, it's just trying to determine, does it have impacts, and can those impacts be mitigated? In this case, what the EIR did, or does, is it analyzed the impacts of the general plan update at full build-out. So what I mean by that is, if you can imagine all the changes that are proposed in the general plan, and then imagine each one of those parcels developing to its maximum potential. That's what the EIR analyzes. Now, I think realistically we know that that's not likely going to occur over the next 20 years, but that's what we try to measure, so sort of that most extreme case example. So no specific project is proposed with this EIR, and nor would one be approved as a result of the approval of this EIR. What will happen, and because this is a program level EIR, going forward, other environmental documents will be able to tier off of this one. All this, general analysis has already been done. This build-out potential of the city has already been assessed. So other environmental documents can sort of lean on that a bit. Next slide. So this EIR was circulated for public review from July 22nd to September 4th. We had a fairly quick turnaround in order to get materials ready for the adoption hearings. Thankfully, there was just the one comment letter. As far as the comment letter, Caltrans just identified issues that we had already pointed out in the EIR, so they were largely supportive of the project. Next slide. Some key findings. There's a final environmental impact report that should have come as part of the packet. The responses to that one comment letter are in there, or the response to. What we try to do when we do our environmental impact reports and our general plans for that matter is we like to refer to our general plan policy documents as self-mitigating. So if we identify an impact through the environmental impact report, we try to create implementation actions or policies that will fix that so that it's not, is not a problem over the course of the 20 years. So if there's a noise impact, for example, that gets identified because there's the potential for this construction to occur, then the implementation action might be that, well, for certain types of construction, you'll require a noise analysis, and that helps to mitigate the impact. This EIR identified certain significant and unavoidable environmental impacts related to air quality, cumulative air quality, GHG, and transportation, but specific to a measure that we use called vehicle miles traveled. And tonight I have my colleague Christine, who's on the environmental side of things at De Novo. So if you have any questions about the EIR, she'll get into the weeds with that. Next slide. Finally, the zoning code update then. So you have new land use designations, and of course, the zoning code is the document that implements the general plan. So the changes to the zoning districts really sort of reflect and almost mirror the changes that are proposed in the land use designations. So the regional commercial zone, for example, is similar to the mixed use 70 land use designation, so that this zoning district is essentially implementing that land use designation. We made, as far as the changes that you're seeing in the residential zones, residential medium density, residential high density, that's a cleanup item, really. The zoning code right now has it's a zone called a residential variable density, and then under that, there's probably 12 different categories. So we collapsed that, we summarized it, and now you have an R2, which is more traditional residential density, and an R3 higher density. And we can answer any questions that you may have about that. The one thing that I would like to point out, circling back to the housing element for a moment, there are requirements in the housing element that the housing element identifies certain sites as your sites inventory. And what the housing element requires is that for those sites that standalone residential be allowed. So even if that property was in a commercial zone, because the site was called out for in your housing element, the requirements of HCD mean that that piece of property, if somebody came in and proposed a project, that they could develop that site as a standalone residential project. There's some affordability requirements, so X% would need to be affordable units, but that is the case. The city was required to do that, and so we've created this housing overlay that identifies the sites that were called out for in your housing elements, and make sure that the overlay and these requirements for standalone residential only apply to those sites. Next slide. There is also, if you remember from the beginning of the presentation, we talked about a lot consolidation program. What we tried to do in this phase 1 of the zoning code update was present some new regulations to incentivize lot consolidation for residential development. Again, this is just following through with program 12 that requires the city to do just this. At this point, I just want the Planning Commission to be clear that this is an item, if the Planning Commission wishes to consider this a little further, this is an item that can be pulled out. We can cover it in phase 2. Really doesn't have to go forward with phase 1 right now. So if any of the regulations were, cause for concern, we can, address that in phase 2 and kind of delete it from the ordinance right now. Next slide. And finally, just with the recommendation, can you just go back for a moment? Great. Recommendation is conduct a public hearing, which we're doing, and to adopt resolution number 2024-14, recommending the City Council approval of the zone text amendments. I don't think I need to read all of these, but the general plan amendment, the general plan update program, final environmental impact report, and the zoning map amendment. And with that, I'll end the presentation and take any questions that you may have.
Thank you for that presentation. Do the commissioners have any questions regarding the presentation? No? Okay, so with that, yeah, I'm good. So with that, I will open up yeah, I will. Do we have any speakers on the, Madam Clerk?
Yes, Madam Chair. We have George Kivett.
Good evening, Chair Stevens and members of the Planning Commission. I've spoke over the years extensively about a lot of what's incorporated into this general plan update. Some of the things that I had suggested over the years are incorporated here, such as extending the mixed-use overlay down Lomita Boulevard to the border with Los Angeles, and making, higher density nodes at that border location there with, between Lomita and Los Angeles, closer to Western. I'd also talked about extending the mixed-use overlay down to Pacific Coast Highway, and that's something I talked about. And also possibly increasing the height allowance along Lomita Boulevard, especially on the south side of the street, where the shadows of increased building height wouldn't fall into residential properties. And I've also spoken extensively about maintaining the R1 neighborhoods, and I think this general plan update does that. And any of you that know me know I'm very in tune with economic development. I belong to 5 chambers of commerce. I've been on the SBACC board of directors for 18 years, and economic development is something that I'm very in tune with. Partly as a couple time past president of the Chamber of Commerce here in town. And I think those items that I've spoke about are incorporated. But the thing that I really don't like about this plan, 2 things. One is that it does allow a great increase in the residential density, much higher than what the RENA numbers would have dictated, much higher. And that wasn't your decision. That was a decision made by the city council. It is what it is. But I'm also very unhappy about the mixed use, high density nodes at Lomita, Pacific Coast Highway, where it intersects Narbonne. I think that's a very inappropriate use of the property there. In my experience, what I've seen is that high density residential combined with a retail component, typically with the mixed use in a commercial district like that, it's a real incentive for the developers because those residential units are the money makers. So they'll build it out, and quite often I've seen in other districts where that mixed use component goes largely unused. I was downtown just a week ago at the convention center, and with another friend of mine that's another realtor, and we were looking at development and just what had been happening, and I saw a lot of unused commercial space in a lot of those mixed-use developments in the downtown area, and I think that's a very inappropriate use at that site. And again, that was a decision made by the council, not necessarily here at the Planning Commission, although everybody had input on that. The other thing that, just with the overall process that I was very unhappy with, was the GPAC portion of this whole general plan process, in that there were no interviews of any of the members of the GPAC by the council. There was 20 or so applicants, I think just over 20. Not one person was interviewed prior to the selection process. And I don't know where that council was that night, if they were asleep at the helm or what, but the people that they picked were people that ultimately, the majority, were not in tune with the process. By the end of that GPAC, we had 25% attendance out of 12 members, 3 people in attendance, as I recall, at the last meeting, and it was slacking all the way through.
George, I'm going to have to stop you here. We'll be here.
Okay, well,
all night.
I've noticed a trend where, when they want, they let people continue talking. When they don't, then, I understand. But I was very unhappy with that. But again, that wasn't your doing. That was, again, the council. And, but it does, bring forth most of what I wanted to see as far as, the general plan update. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, do we have any other speakers or anybody on Zoom?
On Zoom, we have Laura Leitner.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, Chair Stevens and members of the Lomita Planning Commission. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great, thank you. My name is Laura Leitner. I'm the legal representative of Wanderama LLC, which owns property with a 30. What you've heard is a proposed substantial increase in residential density. We understand that the city has to increase its residential density by 829 units, which includes hundreds of affordable units for very low and low-income families. And the city intends to do that by adding a mixed-use overlay and expanding the overlay to reach additional properties along the length of Lomita Avenue and Narbonne Avenue. So we were not aware until Friday evening when we finally were able to look at the zone text amendment that the city is proposing to ban all laundromats throughout the city. And what's interesting is the workshop presentation materials for the text amendment say much of the city's lower income need is planned to be accommodated in the existing mixed-use overlay zone located on Narbonne Avenue and Lomita Boulevard. Laundromats are an essential neighborhood service, especially for low-income units that will likely not have washing machines in their unit. Since this general plan update and zone change will increase residential significantly on Narbonne Avenue, this is the perfect opportunity to expressly permit, not prohibit, laundromat uses in the DC zone. The proposed laundromat ban is simply incompatible with the city's significant increase in affordable housing. There's also numerous existing buildings that have no laundry facilities within the building. So to have no new laundromats would be detrimental. And it really isn't fair to make anybody, including low-income families, drive to a neighboring city to access laundry machines. So we're here requesting that laundromats be expressly permitted within the DC zone. And we believe that currently those are permissible as similar uses to things like dry cleaners. The code currently for the DC zone says basic personal services like dry cleaners or any use similar to those uses that are of comparable nature and of same class as those uses may be permissible in the zone. So, like I said, my client has had a laundromat there for over 3 decades. And there's a few others that everyone is relying on, and now you're going to bring 829 new units to the city at a minimum, and it's absolutely critical that there be laundromats, and it's a little suspect to be prohibited throughout the city. In fact, the only other use that we're seeing prohibited across all the commercial zones are massage establishments and laundromats, and we can only suspect why that might be. In the event the city were to adopt the zone text amendment, which we really hope you will not, and we hope you've had the opportunity to read our letter last week and the letter we sent today, we did at minimum request that fluff and fold service be expressly permitted anywhere that a dry cleaner is allowed, because those are virtually identical uses, and the only difference is that a fluff and fold doesn't use harmful chemicals. So our primary request is laundromats have to be allowed in the DC zone. It's just unacceptable to bring this much housing, including affordable housing, to the city, but not allow them to do laundry. But at a very minimum,
Laura?
self-enforcement be expressly permitted because they're virtually identical to dry cleaners. Thank you so much for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Point taken, but that's not an item that we're not going to be changing that, I believe, this evening, possibly in a future update. Let me refer to legal. He's looking at me.
The proposed changes that she's saying right now, we're not.
The laundromat use is part of this text amendment. It just wasn't presented.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Madam Speaker, or Clerk, do we have any other speakers?
I don't see anyone else with the hand raised on the call. Oh, actually, no, I do not.
Okay, with being no others, I will now close the public hearing. Is there any discussion from any of the commissioners?
Question for staff. On that call, can you, I assume you've digested that?
I think we can try to speak to that. And so the speaker was speaking to the fact that in our new land use chart, we do identify laundromat as a use that would not be permitted in any of the commercial zones. And Perry and I had a conversation about that last week, and we are ready to make a recommendation that we allow laundromats on the CZ zone. They're currently allowed in the CG zone, which is one of the largest commercial zones in the city. And so they would be allowed in the CC zone if that's a recommendation that the Planning Commission would accept. And also would be allowed in the manufactured commercial zone, which is a smaller zoning designation, but it would be allowed in those two zones. And in addition, there is a residential development provision for development over 6 units that also require laundromats for those units. And if that is not a requirement for mixed use, staff would also make a recommendation that it would be added to the commercial mixed use zoning. So in other words, if there's a mixed use development project that includes 6 residential units or more, then laundry self-serving component be a requirement for those projects.
So could it be a requirement, but it could also satisfy the commercial component for that development? If it was large enough?
So it would satisfy the requirement for the residential uses. And then if there are a need for laundromats as a commercial component, that they would be allowed in the CC or the manufacturer zoning.
Which is a good option. Okay, just want to make sure that we weren't banning laundromats in the city of Lomita as was.
Let me tag on to Bob's comment, or what are they doing about the existing laundromats that we have, as they mentioned in this letter? Are they going to be grandfathered in?
So they would be grandfathered in with one exception. And so in the case of the specific laundromat that the speaker was speaking about is a laundromat that was not ceased operation for more than 6 months. And as a result, they lost their nonconformity, which is why they're submitting an application for that now. But if there is a laundromat out there that does not cease operation and continues to operate that use, they would have a nonconforming right to maintain that use.
Because I know of 2 right now, right? The one up the street and the one over on PCH by El Brillo Jr.
Actually, there's 8 laundromats
Well,
in Lomita and 3 dry cleaners. so, that are currently in operation. So, I mean, it's,
Okay, well, this is just two that came to mind right now.
yeah,
Okay,
so
okay.
if, yeah,
So
no,
it'll be addressed.
So that is a separate application, will
Right.
be coming to
Okay.
you soon, so we don't want to get into the
Okay,
weeds on
and
that
that's
application.
fine. I just wanted to see if,
So that you just mentioned in that regard will not be addressed on the general plan tonight?
So the recommendations that staff is requesting are amendments to the zoning code that's up for your discretion tonight.
But are we going to change the zoning code now, or will it be after this is passed?
So this would be a change that, it's a small change, and it's a change that we would be ready to make now if the commission agrees to make it. And there's only two components to that change. One is to allow laundromats as a permitted use in the CC zone. And then the second component would be to allow, or to require a laundromat for mixed-use projects that include 6 residential units or more.
But as a clarification, if I may, it doesn't happen here. We make our recommendation, it goes forward to city council, they have to vote on it, and then it has to, correct. There's a lot that's got to happen. There's not a end date on this, and if you're talking about that letter that we got, that really is, what we're doing is kind of irrelevant to that, because there's another issue with that we can't really discuss right now.
yeah. And
As I see it, if I'm wrong.
my feeling is if we don't adopt something here that's already in black and white, we're going to miss a deadline. And then we're going to be, so if it's something that we can address at a later date, when we're doing zoning code updates or whatever, I would prefer to go that route than to stop and take the chance of our whole general plan being held up for something. That's, but it's up to the commission. So with that being said,
Can we talk about the lot consolidation incentive? Because if it's something that can be removed until a later date and discussed at a later date, with the amount of housing that we're adding with this general plan update, I don't think we need to incentivize further lot consolidation and density building, but I want to hear what everybody else thinks about that.
that's, yeah. So with a lot of consolidation incentive, it includes a much higher density bonus and fee waivers, and the impact of those benefits have not yet been fully assessed. And with all the bills coming and the changing daily of what we have to do, it's hard to keep up on it. So, and we can always revisit that after the general plan is adopted if staff brings us back additional options regarding the incentives. So with that, I would like to make a motion to accept the staff's recommendations with a revision to remove the lot consolidation incentives from the proposed zoning code.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor? No?
Aye.
No, wait. I'm out of turn here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
No, just do an
think
aye
we
roll
took
call. Just do an aye
can
and
just
nay.
do an aye roll.
Just do an aye and nay.
Chair, before we continue with the vote, can we
Yes.
just clarify what exactly this motion is requesting? Are we also including the proposed changes to the laundromat
No.
in this?
No, what I'm proposing is that we just deal with the lot consolidation, and that's what I'm proposing. We would address the laundromat issue at a later date under when we do zoning or however we do that.
Okay,
I think what it is it's the recommendation from staff as presented with the lot consolidation issue is what the motion is.
With revision to remove
Right.
the lot consolidation incentives from the proposed zoning code.
So the lot, okay, you gotta be clear on this. You want the consolidation to go forward without the incentives.
Yes,
Okay. Is that right?
is that right?
Is that outside?
That would be
Is
correct.
is that what you were proposing? I
that
mean,
would-
that's the way I took it,
Right, 'cause I-
was you can still do the lot consolidations, but without the bonus incentives and the waiver, fee waiver and all that kind of stuff.
Laundromat in that whole.
No, this has nothing to do with the laundromat or, so do I need to restate that again?
What,
Mark?
can I make a suggestion that we have council read that back to us so we have a clear understanding of what the motion's going to actually be? So if you can reverberate back to what staff's recommending, taking out the incentives, and then read that, and then we can make the motion backwards.
Or if you go back to the slide where it gives us your
Yeah, because it was on a screen that it kept flashing on and off on my computer, so I didn't know which.
He's trying to find it.
Oh, no, I was going to try to pull the packet up, but the PowerPoint's on this machine.
Well, on the PowerPoint, there was a staff recommendation.
Yeah, there was.
There wasn't? No? I thought I saw a slide.
If somebody has a hard copy packet, I can.
It's right here.
Well, I had one. Steve's got his. He probably has it earmarked for you.
Actually not this time.
No.
Because,
Well, I did, but then mine ended up on the floor.
and it went 10 different directions. We should have had these in binders with tabs on them.
Yeah, both sticky notes. Oh,
Paper.
wait a minute, I know where it is.
If I can suggest, maybe Linda, the next time we get a package this large, can it be with tabs on it? If we get a package this size the next time, can we have it with tabs in a notebook? It might be a lot easier than having papers, because Brenda said hers went flying in the air.
They had tough enough time to get into us this time.
Well, I know that, but I'm just saying, I mean, it's,
No, No, I agree.
That's right.
Consolidating lots. But I don't see the recommendation.
agree.
Incentives. Waiver.
I'm just gonna hide.
I apologize, it's only over 1,000
removal of
pages to
section
go
A.
through.
It's 1,082 to be exact.
Okay, I can take a stab at the motion now, if we're all ready for the language for the motion. So we are going to motion to approve resolution number 2024-14, 2024-05, 2024-02. It's one resolution. And 2024, sorry, we're moving to approve resolution 2024-14, subject to removing section 11-1.53.10 on incentives.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that's the motion.
11, what was it?
11.1. You said. Just gotta make sure we're all on the same page.
So do you want to reread that?
You saw the code?
So it's, and
Okay, wait a minute. 11.
with the lot consolidation incentives removed from the proposed zoning code update.
Section 11-153-10. Correct. Okay. It's on page 34 if anybody wants to know where that is. Okay. So, and that specifically was my intent to cover the lot consolidation and waivers, fee waivers, correct? I just want to make sure that you know what I was proposing.
Subparagraph F. Oops, wrong one. Subparagraph F.
Yes. Thank you.
Oops, I'm on this page.
Okay. So does everybody understand the motion?
I believe so, but I think it should be read again just for clarity.
Just to make sure.
So the commission is going to, the motion on the table is to approve Resolution 24-14, amending the zone text amendment to remove Section 11-1.5310.
Correct.
Paragraph.
Subparagraph F. Or F.
Subparagraph F on incentives for lot consolidation.
That's right there. Oh, the whole thing?
The whole thing.
Oh, okay, well, that
The
said,
whole
it said,
thing.
it said waiver and reduction of fee, that's why, that was the other thing. That was the other thing that was in
Because you
there.
can pull out
Okay,
bits and pieces,
yeah,
but I'm
because
making
that was
the
another issue
motion
about the waiver.
to remove the whole thing.
Yeah, okay, because that was another issue with the waiver of fees, too.
Yeah, so that's all incorporated. I'm saying take out
Okay.
whole section 11.1-1.53.10. The whole thing. Whole
So
thing.
one last time, just for clarity of the record.
Okay.
The commission is voting, the motion on the table is to approve resolution number 2024-14, subject to amending the proposed zone text amendment by removing section 11-1.53.10 on incentives.
Correct.
Correct. So do we need a re-motion and second that or not, since it's been
Well,
rewritten?
I've made the motion, he's verified it, I just
Okay.
need a
The
second.
chair made the motion, I just clarified what the motion is about.
So Commissioner Graff has seconded it, okay.
Okay.
So now we can have discussion. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No.
Go ahead, Chair Stevens, I'm sorry.
No, do we need to have a discussion, or can we just vote
You could
on it?
ask for discussion if you want.
Does anyone have anything to say regarding the motion that's on the floor?
No, okay,
Okay.
then call the question.
Madam Clerk, can we have a roll call, please? Or
Just call an aye or a nay.
all in favor, say
Aye.
aye. Motion opposed? Motion passes.
Okay.
Okay.
Now we can talk about getting the tabs on the notebook?
Oh, no. Okay, and with that,
I thought they banned notebooks,
there's
phone
no
books a long
other
time ago.
questions. Can I get a motion to adjourn? I didn't know if you were trying to say something. So, meeting adjourned.
Okay.